The morning after Donald Trump was elected, the very moment the MAGA movement was solidified, the left woke and chose darkness. They chose treachery. They woke up and chose fascism. We saw the beginnings of it in the summer of 2020. The left called out for violence, supported looting and burning in the streets, and called for defunding of the police, a frighteningly destructive moment that has led us to the fire pit that America has grown to become in the months since. The left leaked a draft ruling that didn't support their agenda and yet upheld constitutional law, so they leaked it. And then they openly activated and supported unlawful violence against those Supreme Court justices who didn't do what the left wanted them to do, who dared to actually do their jobs, which is to uphold the rule of law, the Constitution of this country. And the dark and evil corruption has reached new depths of low with Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, the power-hungry left. They're showing again and again that they have now weaponized the Department of Justice against their political enemies, as Joe Biden calls Republicans dangerous, extremist fascists who want to end democracy. And then his media minions carry that message forward on television, comparing Republicans to Nazis to actually Hitler.
Trying to figure out, how did people get basically drawn in by Hitler? How did that happen?
Wow.
And I'd watch newsreels and I'd see this guy standing up there ranting and raving and people shouting and raising their arms. I thought, what's happened to these people? Why did they believe that?
They've turned Americans against each other in a political civil war. And in some cases, it's more dangerous than we could have imagined. In some cases, it's even deadly. Look at just the last 2 weeks, for example, a snapshot of just how bad it's become and just how much worse it may actually get. On Wednesday of last week, on September 21st, New Mexico Republican gubernatorial candidate Mark Ronchetti received a call he wasn't expecting, a call from his wife that someone shot out their windows in their garage. Last weekend, on Saturday, September 24th, 2 volunteers for Texas Governor Greg Abbott, the Republican, his reelection campaign, were assaulted while knocking on doors in a Houston suburb. This, according to Harris County law enforcement officials. Someone chased the 2 volunteers through the neighborhood, ripped off the side view mirrors of their car, the one they're in, and tried to pull them out of the car. Republican. Last week, an 84-year-old right-to-life volunteer, a Michigan woman named Joan Jacobson, was allegedly shot while passing out pamphlets. That woman, the woman shot in the shoulder while going door to door, talking with people about a proposal on the Michigan ballot for Election Day. The man who shot her, well, he's spoken out and he says it was an accident. 74-year-old Richard Harvey says he accidentally shot the right-to-life volunteer after they got into a heated back and forth over abortion.
It was from the side, so I must have kind of turned sideways to see her and to see the man, and the bullet went over the top of my shoulder and out my back.
Yeah. And a young man in North Dakota who paid for Joe Biden division and vitriol with his own life after a 41-year-old man named Shannon Brandt killed the 18-year-old Kaylor Ellingson. He ran him over because he deemed him to be a Republican extremist. A politically motivated attack, the hatred, the violence working its way down from the top, from Biden all the way down. A teen murdered just for being a Republican, just weeks after the president of this country calls half of this country a danger to democracy.
Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
Civilians, Americans turning on each other, but as we know it, it doesn't stop with civilians. The Department of Justice, the FBI, have effectively turned against the American people, at least half of us, but only those the left doesn't agree with politically, that half. The most horrific case yet might be the story of that Catholic activist who had 30 FBI agents sent to his house to arrest him in front of his wife and 7 children. Mark Houck is the founder of an organization called the King's Men, which promotes Christian virtues among men and is a well-known pro-life activist in the Philly area. Every Wednesday, he sidewalk counsels at Planned Parenthoods in Philly for 6 to 8 hours of his own time. Last year, in September of 2021, Houck was counseling when a pro-abortion protester leading people into the building threatened his young son and yelled obscenities at him. He bullied and intimidated the 12-year-old boy, who was just there to help counsel women. Houck then pushed the man away from his son, like any father would do. Houck never charged him, never did anything. And the man tried unsuccessfully then to sue him for that. Those charges were eventually thrown out in court. That was until last Friday when, according to his wife, at least 20 to 30 heavily armed FBI agents raided their home at 7:05 in the morning on September 23rd. Houck's wife said they entered the home and pointed rifles at them as their 7 children, began crying and screaming. Imagine the scene, folks. The wife and the kids watched and sobbed as they arrested Dad, Mark. Of course, it's unprecedented that the FBI raided President Trump's home, but this could be worse. Mark Houck, a man who seems to pose no threat to anyone, a man who promotes Catholic values, tries to help people, tries to save lives. And here's the thing. Mark Houck offered to talk to Biden's FBI 3 months ago. He was willing to cooperate with the investigators, and yet now Biden's DOJ is charging Houck with violating the FACE Act, and he's facing a maximum sentence of up to 11 years in prison, 3 years of supervised release, and fines of up to $350,000. Biden's DOJ claims that Mark Houck was blocking access to the abortion clinic, which is what the law is designed to prevent, but the incident outside was nothing more than a minor scuffle. The leftist extremist rhetoric in action here, folks. Here's the thing. These are all moments. There are a lot of little moments, bigger moments. History shows us that this kind of ratcheting up of the rhetoric leads to a moment or an event that becomes a flashpoint. Joe Biden and his DOJ are playing the most dangerous game, convincing the American people that the government is out to get them, at least the Trump side, turning countrymen and women against each other. Americans are watching the January 6th witch hunt hearings, the unfair treatment of those associated with MAGA versus how actual criminals are being treated in American cities. Think about that for a second, folks. Merrick Garland's calls to investigate parents who ask questions at school board meetings about what their kids are being taught. Parents fearing retribution for criticizing school policies. A government in power so threatened by an inevitable red wave and the inevitable rebirth of the MAGA movement by a country frightened by its nation's path. They resorted to frightening banana republic tactics. Raiding the private home of a former and likely future president. Raiding the private home of a peaceful man because he's spreading Catholic principles that are counter to their brand of wokeism. What kinds of tactics are these? Is Joe Biden really okay with all this? What kind of visual is this for Joe? You all right with this? Sending your Department of Justice on manhunts? Attacking citizens? Well, it started with the election of a man, Donald Trump, who was elected by voters who had it with being attacked for wanting a strong economy, to be prosperous, to return to true American values and ideals. The left chose this. They've chosen lawless, partisan, political violence and attacks. They'd better be prepared to deal with the consequences of that choice.